Hello, hello, hello. I don't know if that's gonna fit in there. Ooh, just barely, barely fit in there. I don't know how much I'm gonna be able to do on this from here. Greetings. Well, we're gonna work on this tomahawk a little bit. I'm gonna clean up the speckles and stuff on the inside. It's all annealed. We did it this morning. I left it in the insulation. So now we're gonna try to finish it up, clean it up a little. Maybe. So this is a vise of my own design. We're working on a tomahawk that we started this morning. This is a vise for working on blades that I made up several years ago. And I do sell a few of them occasionally for guys who like to work on blades. See how that turns around like that? You can flip it. It's actually got mounting holes so you could mount it into a bench if you wanted to. This way you can work on both sides of the handle at the same time. This is just a little old flap wheel on a drill. You can mount those like into a drill vise or into a post vise. They'll go into a die grinder, but that stuff tends to go too fast for me. I'm just taking the rough edges on it. So this is if you're a blade maker, you're going to be doing a lot of blades. You almost need one of these tools like this. This is kind of one I designed myself. I don't know if I have any of them built up and for sale on the Etsy store or not. I did have a couple of them for sale. I don't know. It's been a while since I don't know if I sold the last one on there or not. But Oh, and the hammer drill. Oh, there you go. So what makes this, that's what we're working on. So what makes this a little different to me? A lot of them, shut off that, I'm getting a bunch of notifications. Is I put, this is the hoof pad out of old used horseshoes, and it's nylon. So I've got a piece of it glued in there, and I've got a piece of it here. That keeps you, when you get your blades done, that keeps you from marring up your blade when you put it in there. So that looks pretty good. Yeah, I've got a couple of them made up. I think I got another one over there. So this one's all annealed out. It's as soft as it can get, because I've been softened it up. It's sat in the vermiculite for till it cooled off. Now we're just going to polish this up a little bit. I'm not going to get too worried about it because the original ones were pretty rough, and with that rasp on there, we're not going to spend 4 hours on $100 thing. Thank you. I use one of these rechargeable flap wheels because a plug-in one goes about 11,000 RPMs, and that's way too fast for doing this kind of work. When you forge one of these up, because see, that was folded in half and welded, you can just barely see the seam right there. So I took a rasp. Let me go find one. A lot of people don't understand this. Okay, so this is a horseshoe rasp. This is a tool that farriers use to do the pedicures on the horses. And you can see they got a real high side, a rasp side, and they got a file side on them. Well, this is really good, fairly good steel. Not as good as the old ones, but it's fairly good. And it works really good for making these. Now, what a lot of people don't know is carbon steel actually forge welds a lot easier than iron or mild steel. And so I can actually get my little one burner forge over here hot enough that it will it'll forge weld these with a really good forge weld, and that's a strong weld. You can see I got a little creep and crud on the inside of that. So what I did is I cut about 10 inches of this rasp off. I cut this end off, and I cut this end off, and then I folded it over, and you weld it together. And that's how you do a forge weld on that. Here's a finished one up. And this is actually 3 pieces. So I folded it over and then I forge welded this bit in here. So right there, it's actually 3 pieces of steel. As you do this, though, you flux that, and that flux coats everything. You got to get in there and clean all the flux out. Now this particular one, I wanted to try something different, so I took a little piece of brazen rod, and when I got done with the forge weld, I put a little piece of brazen rod in there and then stuck it back in the forge to see if I could braze that shut. And it kind of worked. Sure didn't hurt anything. So we got that about 90% forged to finish, which means that when I got done forging on that, there was only about 10% left to do to get it to where you could put it on a axe and try it. So before we harden this up, and I'm totally out of handles. This is the only handle I got left. I'm gonna have to order some more or make some. But there is your tomahawk. Now that I'll have to harden that up because it's soft, and we'll do that in a minute. I'll show you how I do that. You don't want the whole thing hard. You only really need inch or two on that hardened up. The rest of that you're better off leaving it annealed. But that's a pretty traditional little tomahawk and would be handy. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to start the forge up, and we'll put that in the forge and heat that up, and then I'll show you how I harden that. Now we wait. So this old cream can is my oil quenching tank. It's full of 30 weight husky oil that was taken out of the ground not 5 miles from where I'm standing. So we use oil to quench on this particular steel because I've done so many of them that I know that it works. Now you'll notice that it's in a steel container with a steel lid. And if you're going to get into this whole blacksmithing thing and you're going to be quenching a lot of stuff and you're going to be using oil to quench stuff, do not, I repeat, do not put your oil in a plastic container or a glass container. Do not do that. And the reason you don't want to do that is it only takes 2 or 3 blades of quenching in that. What is that? Maybe 3 gallons of oil for that oil to get hot enough that it will melt a 5-gallon bucket. Now, if you've ever seen 3 gallons of flaming oil spilling out onto a floor that's at 250 or 300 degrees, it is not fun. So I'm not one to tell people what to do too much, but this is one of those things that if you value your own life and your building, this is what you do, because if it gets hot enough that it flashes and it catches on fire, I can put the lid on it and it'll put it out. Thanks for the likes, I appreciate it. So what we're trying to do is just heat up the end of this that we're going to sharpen. Well, NJ, how do you know when you get the temperature up? Well, we test it by getting it to critical temperature. And critical temperature with this particular steel that I use is when a magnet won't stick to it anymore. Now, I've done hundreds of these knives out of this particular material. So I can pretty much tell by color when it's above critical temperature. But for the sake of argument tonight, we'll use a magnet. And when the magnet doesn't stick to it anymore, I'll know it's at the proper temperature. Now that forge was cold when we put that piece of steel in there. And so the inside of the forge has to warm up at the same time that the steel does. It would have been more efficient to do this when the forge was already hot. But I've been working on this project all day long today, and I'm sure that there's a couple of you that would like to see it finished. So. Well, I would have more of that kind of content, but YouTube doesn't like it, so they stay in the background. I personally am not a fan of Sonoran Institute. I've kind of heard that they aren't real great. I think you're better. I think if you were going to get into guns and you were going to be getting into gunsmithing, I think you'd probably be better off to go spend the money that you spend on Sonoran Institute and go either apprentice with a machinist or find a gunsmith that would have let you apprentice for a little while, even if you had to pay them to let you be there. Because like any of these trades, like what I do, you can read about it in a book all you want to, but until you actually do it, you're really not learning anything, because it's the practical part of this whole deal that makes this work. So, but that's just my opinion. 36 years of blacksmithing. So this is just a heat sink. I'm going to put it in there on top of that steel to keep the rest of that from getting hot. In a coal forge, I could just put the end of that into the forge and just let a little bit of the edge get hot. But because we're using this gas forge to do this, you have to put so much of the material in underneath the flame that it tends to heat up the whole thing, or more than you want. So what I did is I just took a big old chunk of cold steel and I laid it on the part of the tomahawk head that I didn't want to quench, and it'll suck that heat out of that and keep that temperature lower than the critical temperature. When you quench this stuff, including blades or anything, you want to make sure that you quench the whole thing. And it doesn't matter if you're just trying to do the end or half of it, you want to quench the whole thing, because if you leave half of it out, you'll end up creating a heat shunt, and where you didn't put it in the oil or the water or whatever you're quenching in, it'll crack right there. Not quite there. Takes a little while. When the forge was cold, it takes 15 or 20 minutes for the forge to get totally up to temperature. That's a good thing to do. These ones will probably get lost in a boating accident at some time. This is a new video. I am live. I'm going to be forging here in a minute. As soon as I get done with this, I'll get done with this little hawk head. Perfect. That's great. I've got 1,100 videos that you guys can go watch if you're interested. Well, the propane torch might not get hot enough to, it'll get hot enough to soften up aluminum. Annealing aluminum is a kind of a different thing because ferrous metals are all kinds of different than non-ferrous metals. I'd love to show them to you, but I can't because YouTube hates it. I do forge aluminum quite a bit. You forge aluminum at a really soft temperature, and it does work harden very badly. So if you're cold forging aluminum, you have to be real careful. Yeah. I'll show you about aluminum here in just a minute. Let me get this done. There we are. Now I'm going to polish that back. And I just filled this with water. See how I polished that back? Now what I'm going to do is, while that's still a little warm, I'm going to run some color up in there, and I'm looking for a bronze straw color on the edge, and that's tempering. So I've hardened it, and now I'm going to temper it. I'll do it over here so you can kind of see what I'm doing. There it is. That's all it takes is just a little bit of heat. We're trying to get that. I want it hard, but I don't want it brittle. I might have almost gone just a little too much, but that's about right. We test it with a file. I want you to hear it because we go by sound. So I know that it's hard if this file will skate off of it. It won't cut. Hear that? You hear how the file skates across it? It's not cutting. I know I've got it pretty hard right there. So that's just about where I want. And that, children, is how we make a tomahawk head. Yeah. All right, I'll show you how to work some aluminum here in a minute. It's kind of interesting. Maybe somebody will get something off of that, but let me finish this up first. So I generally will leave most of that oil on there just because it protects the work from rusting. And now we're going to give it an edge. And the easiest way to do that is right here. I'm going to touch it with my finger to make sure I don't have it hot. This is probably an 80 grit. I use 60s for taking off material and 80 for doing finish. I don't want it to get hot. Testing it with my thumb. And that's sharp enough for what I got to do. There's our tomahawk. Pretty usable tool. So that's a kind of a traditional Native American style one. Here's my Viking ones that I do. Yeah? All right, let's mess around with some aluminum for a minute. Let me get my hands cleaned off. Okay. See if you can find a piece of aluminum. Let me see if I can find a piece of aluminum quick. Right here. All right, so this is just a piece of aluminum bar. And let me move some of this stuff out of the way. Oil off my tongs. Okay. When you're hammering on this aluminum, when I was doing horseshoes, we used to forge them cold, but we didn't forge them much. So you can forge them a little bit before that starts to work hard and get hard. But at some point, it's going to start to break. And you have to be real careful when you heat this, because it'll break apart if you get it too hot. And so an old farrier showed me years ago, when you're doing aluminum horseshoes, you use the back of your wooden handle, and when that leaves a mark on that aluminum, that's the heat that you want. So that probably turns to charcoal at what, 220 degrees or something like that, and that's forging temperature for aluminum. If you get it too hot, though, it'll break apart. So you can see the mark there, see? Yeah, a Sharpie marker is probably the same thing. It's probably got about the same temperature as this, but as a farrier, this is the tool that I have in my hand all the time. But you can see how easy that forged once it, how easy that forged once it got up to temperature. But if you let it get too hot and then you try to forge it, it'll just disintegrate. Okay, let's read some comments. I've seen a trick when you worked in a machine shop until the Sharpie marker vanishes. Yeah, there's probably a Sharpie's got a lot of alcohol in it, and so probably when that burns off, it's probably about the same temperature. Preheating for welding. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how talented I am. You know, if you do something for 35 years, you better get good at it. Or you better go find something else. Hit the like button for me, you guys. Subscribe and go like some of my other videos. Any advice for, yeah, watch YouTube. When I started 36 years ago, there wasn't any, there was nothing. I apprenticed. I went to school, I went to farrier school, and then I apprenticed. And I really didn't get to be a very good smith. Probably it took me 6 or 7 years before I could shoe horses, I could shape horseshoes, I could make basic tools for shoeing horses, but when it came to actually smithing, it took me a long time because I didn't learn that stuff. If a guy could find a good school or go apprentice with somebody, you know, there are blacksmith clubs in virtually every state in this country, and some of them have 2 or 3 clubs. So if you were really interested in it, that would be a really great way to learn, would be to go join one of the clubs. So I got this like pretty clean, but I do tons of knives. I used to do a lot of knives. So this is a piece of Damascus. I need to polish it up again. But that's a Osage with a hand done guard. Well, there's a lot of guys that want to make blades. I can tell you one thing, it's a lot harder to make a living making knives because there's so many guys doing it. So I do about 200 knives a year. Here's one of my rasp knives that I haven't finished yet that I'm just working on. So I got to finish this one up. I don't know if I'll get her done tonight, but I'll show you the latest one that I'm really proud of. Just stand by. I don't do a ton of commission work, but this is a piece. So I don't do the leather. I've got a guy who's done 700 knife sheaths for me. His name's Joe Gomez. He's here in Cody. This is elk horn. That's got elk horn handles on it. A sax, Viking sax. Carry them like that. It's not easy on your body, this job. because you're always lifting heavy stuff. It's hard on your hands. I've got tinnitus in my ears. My ears are continually ringing, and generally when I'm doing this, I would have ear protection, but you know, there's a lot of old blacksmiths out there. Oh, Yuri Hoffy, he did it until he was in his 90s. I'm 36 years in, and I'm still upright. So what do I got to complain about? My back hurts every day, but if you get some power tools, it's not so bad. Don't wear yourself out swinging a hammer every day. And I've got a couple of power hammers in here, and this treadle hammer right here. This treadle hammer right here is a moneymaker for me. And then I've got the other big power hammer over here. And then I've got a cyclical one that I made myself. So I'm at a point now where I do a lot of art. Yeah. Well, do you want to be strong or do you want to look like you have muscles? So if you want to build strength, you do lots of reps with less weight. If you want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you do less reps with more weight. Well, guess what I do every day? I swing a hammer 3,000 times a day. And I'm going to show you here right now. We're going to swing a hammer right now. You can start doing basic smithing with very little. You don't even need a handle. You can make a forge for next to nothing. You can buy the burners off of eBay for 50 bucks. A good quality hose, which and regulator, which I recommend, it'll cost you 100 bucks. So you can build yourself a forge for under $200. The only thing I don't build in my shop myself is the anvils, and I used to do some hammers. I used to forge some hammers, but you can buy them for so cheap now that I don't bother. But I do all my own tools. Differential punches, tongs, forge, power hammers. I build all that stuff myself now. So when I started shoeing horses, I had a 1973 Oldsmobile Omega. Had a pretty good sized trunk in it. And my uncle and I built a 18-inch, 50-pound anvil out of a piece of 90-pound of the yard railroad iron. And a 3-legged stand with a place to slide that anvil in one end and a vise on the other end. And the legs slid into, they were pieces of pipe, one size bigger than the other, and they slid into each other like that, and that's what the legs were. And I shod probably 500 horses with that and a little forge that, a little one-burner forge that I had made up. I probably did, well, I paid for my college shoeing horses out of the back of that Oldsmobile until I could do something else. So space really isn't an issue. Thanks for the likes. I appreciate it. It helps. let those warm up for a minute. I haven't had a real job, like worked for somebody else, for more than 8 or 10 months. I took some cowboying jobs, and I worked for the city part-time in the spring. Sometimes I go help the irrigation company. But I haven't had a real job in probably since 1999. And actually, since before then. Actually, it was probably a lot before that, because I had I moved to Park City, Utah, and I got on a framing crew and I worked, but I didn't work for very long. I only worked for maybe 8 or 10 months. So I haven't had a full-time, all-time job in 30 years. All right, we're going to do I'm going to show you how to do one of these leaves on this treadle hammer that I built. No, I'm not going to watch the inauguration tomorrow. I don't give a shit about that. There ain't one of them bastards back there that gives a shit about me other than what I can do for them. Why would I even waste my time? Doesn't make no sense at all. All they want to do is steal your life. Because what nobody understands is all money is time. It is time. Money is time. Trade your hours of work, your hours of labor, your hours of thought, whatever you're doing, you trade it for money. Unless you're somebody like Elon Musk or the Koch brothers or somebody like that, you're never going to get ahead thinking that way. Your time is infinite on this planet. You're better off doing something that you enjoy doing than chasing that money. Because I've been around a lot of rich people, and I can honestly tell you that they were no happier than I am. you get to a place where you make enough money that the more money you make doesn't help you with your quality of life at all. And I personally have always found, having been fairly wealthy at one time and being poor and homeless at one time, that life is a lot more fulfilling if you have to struggle a little bit. And I think a lot of those really rich people, they have to invent struggle in order to maintain their sanity. And I got better things to do than sit around trying to think about ways to make my life terrible. Oh, the government, oh, oh, no. How many jet planes do I need? Oh. I'm going to go turn the fan on. I'll be back. Do you think that the Buffetts or Elon Musk or Donald Trump are any happier than I am? I have no responsibility. I owe nobody any money. I'm not cold, wet, or hungry. More do you need than that? We're going to do a little fancy horse face there. Would my life be better if I was driving a new pickup truck every year? And the whole thing is, the whole system is rigged against you. Like the whole tax system is rigged against you. They want you to go get in debt for a new pickup, and now you got to pay the taxes on a new pickup, or you got to have the latest refrigerator or whatever. The system feeds like that, and I refuse to perpetuate it. I just ain't going to do it. Elon Musk might be smart, but could he come in this shop and make a knife or an axe that he can go use, or a tool that he can go use and be productive with? Would he have the skill to come in here and light this forge up and do that? No. No. The more stuff you have, the more stuff that you're attached to, the more problems it creates. Do I get tired of doing hat racks, 1,500 hat racks every year? Yeah. You think Elon Musk gets sick of going in and having to deal with the knuckleheads that he works with at Tesla? If you hang around with people all the time that are blowing smoke up your ass telling you how great you are, you start believing that. When you're doing this kind of work, when you're drawing this stuff down like this, you want to drop down on the square. You don't want to try to do it round. So I do a four-sided, I taper it down, and then I round it up. I get done with these hooks, I might work on the handle on this knife a little bit later. I don't know. We'll see what time, what kind of time we're dealing with. We're over an hour now. So it's pretty good, but it's just a little sharp in here. And so I got to get in here on this edge, and I want to knock these edges down a little bit so it feels just a little better in the hand. And enough of my preaching. Let's go back to blacksmith. Where's my Dr. Pepper? This is a hat rack. Now, at last count, I've done something like 2,500 of these, and I just got an order for 80 more. This mounts against the wall, and then you put your hat on there like that. Keeps it away from the wall. Works good for bike helmets and whatever. It's always a good place to hang your chapeau. Do I get sick of making these? Doggone right I do. But this is the backbone of the business. This allows me to do the knives and do the jewelry and do the bits and the spurs and the tomahawks, all the other stuff I like to do. Because this Tomahawk, I've probably got 3 hours in this Tomahawk, and there ain't no way I can get my money out of it. Like an hourly rate for me. I mean, professional welders, a machine shop, you're going to pay here, you're going to pay $110 to $150 an hour for machine shop work. So I've got 3 hours in that. No, I'm going to put a handle on it and I'll sell it for $120. So it's the hat racks and the drawer pulls and all the simple houseware stuff that allows me to do this cool stuff like this and mess around on a Saturday evening on here doing live streams. I'm going to make a really cool little wall hook here. This is the end of a yeah. Well, if you want to buy a Chinese one, go buy a Chinese one. That's your prerogative. I like to take care of my neighbors. I try to buy everything I can locally. If I can't source it in the United States, I source it in Mexico. If I can't source it in Mexico, I source it in Haiti. My whole childhood, we grew up fighting the communists, and I don't know all of a sudden we're in business with them. Never have understood that whole thing. You know, if you want to buy your stuff from a slave, and I'm just as guilty of it, this phone is made in China because there ain't nobody in the United States making a phone. But I'm going to do it the little as I can. I'm hitting that really lightly to take the hammer marks out. Thanks, appreciate it. See if I can show it to you. So if you go slow and gentle as it cools down, yeah, it runs on propane. You can go around there and tap on it real light, and you can't even see the hammer marks if you have good skill. Make a little hook up. I'm going to use this pen and fork. So I'm going to be giving, I'm going to be starting a subscription service here. We're going to do knife making classes and stuff online on YouTube. And if you become a member, then you get to watch the knife making classes and stuff. And then I'm going to be giving some stuff away. And some of the stuff I'm going to be giving away is the stuff that I'm doing on these lives, like this little wall hook. I'll probably be giving some of these away. I'll kick that over a little bit so you can see that forge just a little better. But he's going to be a happy little wall hook when I get done. He's pretty much done except for the hole. And I can punch them, but I find it easier to drill them, easier to get them even. I make almost all my own tools, like these tongs. And I have made hammers. But they're a lot of work. And I can buy one, and an American-made one for $60 or $70. So an hour of my, I work an hour and go buy a hammer, or I work for 4 hours and build a hammer. And I've been using the same style of hammer for 35 years. So I've got a handful of these. In fact, I probably got enough to last me the rest of my life. I think I've got 4 or 5 of them in here. I'm not sure that Diamond makes these anymore. And these were American-made ones. I think these were forged in Michigan. Now, material is not a problem for me. And probably some of my material does come from China, like the tubing that I use, but I think most of my rod material still comes from the United States, like my strap and stuff. I think it's still forged. I think that's still made in the United States. And I could be wrong because it's really hard to tell. It's not like it's stamped made in China when you get it. So this will be one for keys. I'll show you. You don't need a welder. You don't need a welder. And you don't need a set of tongs to make a set of tongs. All 3 of these sets of tongs were made out of one piece of steel. Okay, I'll show you how I did it. Let me go get a drawing instrument. So this bar of steel isn't thick enough. I like to use something 1/4 inch and something not quite as thick as this. I think this is probably inch and a half or inch and a quarter thick wide. But what you do is you would forge whatever shape of tong you want on this end of this. Okay, so this material comes off. And this material comes off. And now you've got this tong shape in here, right? And then here's your bolster. And then on this end, you're going to do it exactly opposite. You're going to build your tong in here, forge this tong down, bolster, and you're going to get this one as close to this one as you can in shape, but they're backwards. And then what you're going to do is you're going to learn how to forge a chisel. That's the most, it's the basic thing, but it's the first thing that you should forge. Don't screw around with railroad spikes. Go get yourself some truck spring or some good hardenable steel, some sucker rod or something. Learn how to forge some tools first. Don't screw around trying to make a knife. Make yourself a chisel. And if you have to use a set of channel locks or a vice grip or something to hold your material to make your first chisel, that's fine. So you're going to get this in here, and this is going to be your bolster. That's where your rivet would go. This is where your rivet would go. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take a chisel and you're going to split this right here. And this becomes one rein. And the bolster. And this becomes the other rein. Okay? And that's how these are built. Here you can see it. You can actually see it on this set. Well, you can see it on this set. So this shape came out of this. So now you've got a big long piece of material that you can put in the forge. You can forge this end, cool it off, turn it around, forge this end, cool it off. And then the other thing you can do and then once you learn how to do that, you can do more complicated ones. Like these are farrier tongs. These are designed for holding horseshoes. And I use these all the time because I'm doing that kind of work. But they have this little sculpt in them that helps hold the horseshoe good. But then you can learn how to do these, because these are now, instead of being two-dimensional, these are three-dimensional. And to build these tongs, you use square stock. This is too small. This is a little too small, unless you were doing really small tongs. Like you could do a set of these little tongs like this out of something like this. And there's tons of videos on YouTube to show you how to do this. But so then if you get really desperate and you have a hard time working with that in your mind, you can forge them flat. These were actually forged flat. And then what I did is I heated them up in the forge and I just bent these. Now, a tong, thanks. The tongs are the same on both sides. They aren't opposite. This rein and this side of this is exactly the same as this one. So they're fairly easy to match up. These are actually out of a production set that come from a guy that plasma cuts out blanks. He plasma cuts out blanks and he sends you 6 sets of tongs, and then you just forge up whatever you need. A lot of people call these a pause tong. These are big tongs, but they were forged exactly the same way. These are for 1/2-inch round stock. And then what I did is I only forged up this much, and then I welded these reins on. And if you're a good welder, shit, I've had this set of tongs for 10 or 15 years, and they have done hundreds and hundreds of pieces. But the big thing is keeping your bolster thick, because that's where they want to bend, is in here. So But there's a ton of videos about making foam. This is a set I did for a demonstration on TikTok. And I know that's backwards, but you can see I stamped them here, Cody Iron Works. And these are really a handy tong. It's kind of a modified Viking tong. I put this big long end out there for holding round stock. It allows me to get past when I'm doing those sleeves. When they call these a bolt tong. The ones with the holes. These have a lot of uses. But if you've got to grab something weird shaped, but they actually work fairly good on flat stock too, if you have the appropriate size flat stock. So, but I've got a lot of tongs that are kind of odd. Like these. These are specifically designed for holding railroad spikes. Thanks for the likes, everybody. I appreciate it. Tongs down. I don't know what I did. I don't know if I like that or not. That looked wild. Got my bend a little wild. See, I'm a little. See you on Monday. Oh, sure, Chuck. Sounds good. If you like the content, please subscribe. Please like. Please go watch some of my other videos. I give the knowledge away for free. And, you know, it's good karma. It's good karma. See my fancy bending fork I made? Get back to here. We're doing a horse face. So he just needs his eyes. Got him pretty twisted. Morgan and Henry. Must be an English animal. Never heard of a Morgan and Henry. I've got 2 hay buttons. I had a Peter Wright and a Trenton that I just sold. And then this is a National Oil Field Supply bridge amp. And then I think I got another little Peter Wright out at my buddy Jeff's house. This is about a 250 pounder. That's a 100 pounder. And this is a 350 pounder. Huzzah! Come back over here. Woo! Sexy! You show the results of your tools, but you don't. So, I'll show you. I don't have no trouble with that. I make all my own tools. I make all my own pritchels and punches, drifts. I use truck spring, coil spring, or sucker rod. These are made out of sucker rod. That's oil field rod. Comes out of the oil industry. But like there's my punches. See how that's got an eye? That's an eye punch. That's the punch that I use to do the eyes with. And then these are handle tools that I use under the treadle hammer. So these are just a couple of, there's a punch, a short punch, and a short chisel. And this is just an old ball peen hammerhead that I kind of annealed, took some of the hardness out of it. And that works really good for doing the dimpling. But when I say I make all my own tools, other than like a tape measure, I make all my own tools. So this is a divider that I've turned into a compass because I was doing some circles the other day. So I just took a keel and mounted it on there. And occasionally, I do make my own measuring tool. If I can find it out here somewhere. Somewhere around here, I got a foldable ruler that I made that I use a lot, brass one, but I've set it someplace. Now I don't know where it's at. Yeah, so I make all my own tools, including my vices. I make my own vices, like this vise I made. I made my own forge. This forge I made myself. So most of my tools I make myself. All my tongs I make. I haven't bought a new pair of tongs in, I don't know. Sometimes I'll trade stuff and I'll get some machine made ones, but mostly I make all my own. I screwed that up. Should have known better than to do that. Got in a hurry. Wasn't paying attention. Thinking about tools. All right, guys, that's quite a bit of work tonight. Where are we at here? Oh shit, we're an hour and 40 minutes. That's enough. I think that's enough. If you want to see more content, I have so much content. Unless anybody has any other questions for this evening. But I'm live a lot, especially this time of year. It's cold, and so every few hours I start the forge up, do a little work, gets it warm in the shop. I don't have to run the heater so much. So I'm doing stuff all the time. If you came in late, we worked on tomahawks and knives, did a bunch of wild hooks. The one we did tonight, I got to get on eBay and order me some more tomahawk handles. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. We're always doing something different around here. Here's some arrowheads that I forged, old Viking style arrowheads, bodkin points. Here's a bracelet that I did a while back with a little horse face on it, and I even inlaid some copper in it. Here's one that I made a while back. I do quite a bit of jewelry certain times of the year when it's too hot to start the forge. I do a lot of jewelry. I'm never going to run out of stuff to do, because that's the thing about blacksmithing is it is wide open. There are so many different things to learn. Thank you. I've kind of got it blocked off because I got these display towers sitting in here. I was doing some video stuff the other day, and I haven't moved them back out yet. So, all right, I'm going to shut this forge off. Yeah, if you like the content, go watch my shorts. I've got a shit ton of shorts. And you can just scroll through those 15-second, 1-minute shorts. And every little bit helps. Thanks, everybody. Get it hot and hit it. Always wear your safety squints. If you like the content, slip over to the Etsy store. You can see actually some of the products that I sell. And subscribe. Thanks, everybody.